We are live. What's up, everybody? We are Reason, religiously educated atheists, secularists, and other non-theists. Welcome to our live show, which is recurring every Sunday, 9 p.m. Eastern, and is subject to change. I am your host, Aeolus, aka your favorite atheist. You can follow me at God Works Out, and you can find me on Philosophical Atheism, the Facebook and YouTube page, and Religion Hurts Humanity, the Facebook and the blog. And without further ado, we'll go ahead and allow our other members here to go ahead and introduce themselves.
I'm John Gleason, the Godless Engineer, and you can find me on Facebook, Godless Engineer, the page, and we also have a bunch of groups. Just search for Godless Engineering.
Good evening, everybody. I am Brendan, also known as Prototype Atheist. You can find me on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. I mostly do videos on YouTube. That's kind of my deal. Try to put out about once a week, and also trying to do a regular thing here with these guys every Sunday night. So make sure you join us.
Don't forget to check these guys out. They are here because they are great. And as we said before, we are Reason, a.k.a. the Secular Round Table. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the main topic here, the bread and butter, the meat and potatoes, Islamophobia. Is it a real thing? Now, most of you I have seen, you've been tweeting me on Twitter or DMing me on Twitter. I've seen that you asked what was my opinion on the stance of Bill Maher and Sam Harris with their recent Islamophobia. So since Brendan has a pretty good, I guess, synopsis of what Islamophobia is and what it is not, he will be heading off our topic today just so we can go ahead and establish definitions and talking points and what exactly it means when we say Islamophobia. Brendan?
All right, yeah, thank you. Definitely, this is something that has been in the news since Bill Maher's show last week and the whole flap between him and Sam Harris and then Ben Affleck and everybody else on that panel. And it's kind of exploded onto the scene here, so I felt like it's something that we really should discuss. So first and foremost, I just want to basically, come to an agreement on what Islamophobia means. And basically what it means is that you have a prejudice or irrational fear towards Muslims, or more importantly, too, people that are perceived to be Muslims. So this could even extend out to, other Arab people, or even people who wear turbans or clothing that is similar to that of Muslims. So even if they're perceived to be Muslims, you have some kind of animosity towards them just because of that fact. Now, this word certainly does create a lot of confusion because, the root of the word is Islam, Islamophobia, and that sounds like, oh, you have a fear of Islam, the belief system, the religion, but that's really not what it is. It sounds more like Muslimophobia. So I think that first and foremost adds to a lot of the confusion. But beyond that, it also gets twisted all the time into this thing where people will try to call you racist if you try to speak out against the religion of Islam and say that you're attacking a race or you're attacking people, which simply isn't true. And so basically, this word just gets overused, and it's slapped onto people kind of like playing the race card, and it's not cool that way. So you find yourself always having to explain yourself like, Sam Harris and Bill Maher were, and of course, Ben Affleck wasn't really listening to what they had to say. He was just kind of immediately had that knee-jerk reaction. And, obviously Muslims aren't a race. It's a religion. It's a belief system that you choose to believe in. And anybody of any race can be Muslim. There's Arab Muslims, there's Asian Muslims, African, American, whatever, you name it. Anybody can be a Muslim. So, let's just get that out of the way first and foremost. Now, Islamophobia is a real phenomenon. It's something that actually exists, but not the way that it's often portrayed by people. Certainly, especially among evangelical, like conservative Christians in the United States, they have this animus towards Muslims or anybody who they perceive to be Muslim just immediately. And this kind of feeling is stoked by media outlets like Fox News and Glenn Beck and Brian Fisher of the American Family Association, some other outlets as well. And some examples that I've seen of Brian Fisher, he said things in the past, even recently, like we should ban all immigration of all Muslims to the United States, or we should ban the construction of all new mosques in the United States, and we shouldn't allow Muslims to serve in the military. And obviously that's a problem because, we're a free country and the very first amendment to the Constitution is freedom of religion. So we can't be doing those things. So certainly we can disagree with Islam and we can criticize the idea of Islam, but we can't be stripping people's rights away just because they believe something. And so that's a problem. And, that's something that I covered in a recent video that I did called Do Secularists Pick on Christians and while coddling Muslims, to kind of cover that. And because a lot of times we get accused of always focusing on Christianity and it seems like we're protecting Muslims when really we're just trying to fight for their rights under the law and freedom and equality to practice their beliefs. So, and there's been a lot of other examples about this kind of stuff too going on. There was recently an example, I don't recall where it was, but I think it was a 7th grade class somewhere, and they had an assignment to create a pamphlet that they would basically present to like a 3rd grader to explain to them what Islam is. So basically the teacher just wanted them to cover all the basic points, that you could explain what Islam is to like, a younger child. So just basically simplify it. And some parent completely flipped out and made a big fuss about it. And, it was all over Facebook. And then she had all these meetings with the administration and the teachers and all this. And of course, immediately it was like, oh, you're promoting Islam. But that wasn't the case. It was like a world history or a social studies class, and there was just an assignment to learn about the basic beliefs of Muslims and where they live. In that, I'm sure they covered other major religions as well. But of course, it always gets blown up. There's been other incidents of things like this in the past. Like I know in Texas, there was one instance where a class dressed up in like traditional Arab Muslim garb, and of course, a bunch of Christians freaked out over that. But basically they're just learning about the culture, and that's important. It's important to know because religion plays such a role in the world, in politics, and in things that happen. So it's important to understand what people believe, where they live, and what their culture is. And there was another example within the last couple of years too, and it was something that Todd Starnes covered, of course, where there was a high school in Colorado where they had like some kind of multicultural club, and they recited the Pledge of Allegiance in Arabic, and they did it in other languages too. They did it in like Spanish and other languages, but of course, as soon as they did it in Arabic and they translated God properly into Arabic as Allah, which is the word for God, everybody flipped out. All of a sudden, it's a Muslim thing, and of course, there was a big, dust up over it. But when they translated God to like Dio in Spanish, nobody had a problem. But suddenly, you make it Allah, and all of a sudden, it's a Muslim thing. So never mind the fact that not all Muslims speak Arabic and that, Allah is just the translation of a word. But, so basically all these kind of things exemplify that Islamophobia is very much a real phenomenon, but it definitely does get bastardized and overused. And so that's, I think, why there's all this confusion. So that's my piece on it for now. So I will shoot it back to Aeolus then.
All right, thank you for that well-defined, I guess, explanation of what Islam actually is. Shout out to all our viewers over there on YouTube. And without further ado, we're going to go ahead and let the Godless Engineer do what he does.
Well, what I was going to talk about on this subject was the fact that, ideas don't have rights, and they're not free from criticism, as opposed to like attacking a person just for whatever you think they are. It's really simple. Ideas don't have rights like any person does. You can we need to criticize ideas. Because if they can't hold up to criticism, then what good are they? I mean, and with as little criticism as you have to make, and actually to start getting people mad about Bible and Christianity in general, is you really don't have to do that much criticizing of it. But how this plays into Sam Harris and Bill Maher and Ben Affleck thing is that Sam Harris actually admitted that it is bigoted to just label all Muslims as being bad just because they're Muslim, and that exists for sure. But criticizing the religion and not lying about the religion and owning up to the horrible verses as well as the better parts of it is it, is what he was trying to explain there. That it's not racist or is the Islamophobia if you're attacking the whole religion. And it just seems like people today are just saying, well, Islam is a religion of peace. And because I've been hearing that all over everything, even before the Ben Affleck deal, is that Islam is of course peaceful, and so that got me started looking up different stuff in the Quran, and just coming into the second and the third books in the Quran, it's just all hateful cruelty, and it's horrible personally. But that's the thing that stopped the conversation in the Bill Maher and Ben Affleck deal, is that Ben Affleck got in his head that they were being all militant atheist and was just being bigoted towards Muslims when they were just trying to be like, okay, fine, but be honest about your religion, because ISIS is Islamic as well as the whoever doesn't perform these horrendous terrorist acts. But that's all that Sam Harris was really going for in that interview.
Thank you very much there, Godless Engineer. I think also another point that he was making there, too, is they were trying to paint the picture as if this radical group of Muslims was a minority, but actually, looking here, I'll include this link in the comments as soon as I get a chance. 78% of British Muslims support punishing people who publish cartoons mocking the Prophet Muhammad. And when you get to talking about 78%, that is a very high number for people to believe that anyone publishing a cartoon mocking the Prophet should be punished. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, I think that it sounds pretty much on par with most of the religious community, because I mean, while they're not out there physically doing these terrorist acts, that doesn't mean that their views change. They might step it down a good bit, from like killing somebody to, he deserves jail time, and so. I think that it sounds on par. It's just how far do you really want to go with it, or I guess how literal of a translation you want to get with your holy text. But I mean, the fact that a good bit of Muslims voted that the cartoon artist should have been imprisoned or punished for drawing Muhammad that way. The fact that a good bit of them agreed with the lot that was like, they deserve death, shows that it's just a difference in how far you want to take it, or how literal your translation.
Right, right. And I just think that when they try to say that the minority, is this, and it's really not the minority. I mean, I have some other statistics over here that I gathered before the hangout that we're going to go over with. Brennan, did you want to say anything about that specific poll that Sam Harris was talking about?
Yeah, I'd like to just jump in for a second. For one, that absolutely backs up what he was saying. You know, a lot of people either misunderstood Harris or were simply doubting him, and he did, after the fact, he followed up. I know he did an interview on MSNBC and made some other appearances, and he's clarified that, and he's provided these statistics too, like backing up the claims that he was talking about, because he mentioned these stats on the show, and like a lot of people were like, well, where are you getting that from? And he's like, well, here's the studies. And yeah, I mean, you know, over in England, I think it's much more of a problem than it is in the United States presently, as far as like the effect, the impact that Islam is having on the culture there with the Muslims. I don't know if there's more there, or if, you know, I think maybe the politics there, people are kind of coddling them to an extent, and like kind of letting them take advantage of them, and like, you know, kind of get exemption from laws and things like that. So I definitely understand, you know, especially in England, because this is becoming an issue there, and I definitely don't want that to become an issue here as well. So, you know, you got to toe the line between protecting their rights to believe and then, you know, actually getting special exceptions, or not, you know, being above criticism and things like that. So, and yeah, you're right, that number is crazily high. You know, 78% people or Muslims there think that that's a punishable offense, which is completely you know, antithetical to freedom of speech. I mean, that's just crazy. So, you know, one way that people can help fight against that is, they've been doing it for a few years now, and I participated this year, is every May 20th they do Draw Muhammad Day. You know, people just get together and they draw Muhammad, however you want to do it. They post their pictures and they share them, and it's like, you know, what are you going to do? You just got to normalize it. You can't go out and, you know, punish everybody, and so basically, if people want to get involved with that, they should do that. And one last point I want to make too is that, you know, we see that as kind of crazy, that people should be punished for drawing a picture of Muhammad, but you got to remember, there was just that kid in Pennsylvania, who he faced jail time, and actually he ended up getting like probation and community service or whatever for like posing with that Jesus statue. So yeah, obviously that's not the same. I don't want to say that Christians are advocating for, like, you know, throwing people in jail or harming them or anything like that, but at the same time, we kind of have a bit of that here still with Christianity. So, you know, it's not completely just one-sided there with Islam either. So.
Right. I'm very happy that you drew a parallel there with Christianity and that statue, because I'm pretty sure if you did a poll on that, I'd say at least 70% probably would say that we need to punish this kid for what he did, for his, you know, we'll just say the way that he mistreated that statue. But the larger issue here, though, is that it seems that they think, just from this poll, you can ascertain this information, that 78% of Muslims think that he should have been punished for drawing this cartoon of Muhammad. Just with that information, it seems as if they are trying to say that Muhammad is beyond criticism, and probably Islam. No religion is ever above criticism. No idea is ever above criticism. That's how we excel as human beings. We take something, and then everybody chimes in, and we somehow make this thing better by criticizing it, critiquing it, making it better. All ideas should be subject to criticism, and religions are an idea. So, oh, oops, I went off there. Sorry about that. So with that being said, my topic for today, I wanted to speak about why a Quran-based Islam can never be peaceful, and it can never, I guess, you know, respect other people as humans. So we're going to go ahead and I have a couple verses picked out here. We're going to go with, I mean, you can just open the book and start reading it. I believe Sam Harris had a really good quote about it. He said that you could pull out your Quran and start highlighting anything that, you know, prescribed harm or death to infidels, and pretty soon you'd have a book full of highlighted texts. It's pretty sad, but really, that's how it is. So we'll go ahead right off of that. Kill the infidels wherever you find them. And this is the basic idea in the very first 9 chapters. So we're in chapter 9, verse 5 here. So the very first couple chapters of the book are all about the infidels. So I'm going to go ahead and quote this verse here. Let's see. Then when the sacred months have passed, slay the idolaters wherever ye find them, and take them captive, and besiege them, and prepare them for each ambush. But if they repent and establish worship, and pay the poor due, then leave their way free. Lo, Allah is forgiving and merciful. So basically what it is saying there is that you can capture them, besiege them, torture them, do whatever you have to do to them. But if they convert to Islam, then it's okay. You don't have to do any of that because Allah is forgiving. And what that is kind of like forcing this idea on you that you have to be a follower of Islam. And that's just absolutely ridiculous. As I mentioned, the whole beginning of the book is about killing infidels and how they'll burn and torture in hell, and how Allah is so forgiving and merciful, and yet He has prescribed punishment for them for an eternity. Not that much different from Christianity, though. So, another topic that I wanted to talk about here is pedophilia. Because a lot of people know that Muhammad was married to Aisha at the age of 6, and, you know, they consummated the marriage at 9. That is horrible. If your figure that you are upholding as the prophet of your religion was a pedophile, you should really begin to ask yourself some questions. So let's go ahead and get into this verse, 65:4. And those of your women as have passed the age of monthly courses, for them the iddah, if you have doubts, is 3 months. And for those who have no courses, or they're still immature, their iddah is 3 months likewise, except in the case of death. So I'm not going to read the rest of the verse there. It's about, you know, women that are pregnant. But the point being here is that one of the worst inhumane acts that you can perform is an act of violence or pedophilia against a child. Now, of course, that's just my opinion, because I value a child's life. And so I think one of the most horrible things that you can do in the world is things that you do that harm children. And so this verse, 65:4, clearly approves of marriages to prepubescent girls. You should really think about that, because that's very sickening. If you have a son or a daughter, think about your daughter being 6 years old and being able to be married off to some middle-aged guy. It's just not right.
Well, you know,
somebody's chiming in here. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just kind of curious as to what Muslims usually use to combat this, like the ones that don't approve of child marriages. I wonder what kind of arguments they use against it.
The apologetics. We can go over that. We can go over that. I actually have some of that stuff pulled up too as well. But I was going to go ahead and finish these verses here, if that's.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to jump in ahead of time. My bad.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, thanks. All right, so I don't want to make this too long, so I'm just going to go over one more verse here that I picked out. So we're going to go with the Quran's sanction of wife beating. Let's go here. Quran 4:34. Men are the maintainers of women because Allah has made some of them to excel others. Before we even finish that verse, let me just say here that if your religion or your holy text or your creed or your set of beliefs tells you that one individual or group of people are better than anyone else, there is a problem. There is a very serious problem. As a humanist, I believe that we are all equal and everyone should have the same rights as everyone else. So you really need to do some internal questioning here if your religion tells you that anyone is better than anyone else. And this is not, keep in mind here, guys, this is not specific to Islam. This is any religion, any set of ideas, any creed. To continue, 4 and 34. Men are the maintainers of women because Allah has made some of them to excel others, and because they spend out of their property. The good women are therefore obedient, guarding the unseen as Allah has guarded, and those whose part you fear desertion, admonish them, and leave them alone in the sleeping places, and beat them. Then, if they obey you, do not seek a way against them. Surely Allah is high and great. Basically what this is saying is that Muslim women, and it's not only specific to Muslim women because you don't have to be a Muslim woman to be married off to some Muslim guy. But basically, women are property, and if a man thinks that you're disloyal or he thinks that you're neglecting your religious duties, he has an obligation to first, as the verse says, he can cut you off from sex. So he can deny you sex. And if you still do not obey him, he can beat you. Very, very literally put there. It's giving a man the right to beat his wife. According to Muslim law, or Islamic law, let's say that, a husband can strike his wife for 4 reasons that I found. If she does not make herself beautiful for him, that's one, letting herself go. If she refuses to meet his sexual demands. If she leaves the house without his permission, or a legitimate reason, I'm putting that in quotes. If she neglects her religious duties, any of those are grounds for flogging, punishment, and even divorce. If your religion tells you that you can do that to women with all the domestic violence that we have going on in the world, that is a very saddening religion. You should be ashamed of that. So real quick here, I'm going to go over a couple other verses I found, and we'll discuss these afterwards. So 22:19 through 22. Fight and slay the pagans, seize them, beleaguer them, and lie in wait for them in every stratagem. For the unbelievers' garments of fire shall be cut, and they shall be poured over their heads boiling water, whereby whatever is in their bowels and skin shall be dissolved, and they will be punished with hooked iron rods. 2 and 178. O you who believe, retaliation is prescribed for you. In the matter of the slain, the free for the free, and the slave for the slave, and the female for the female. But if any remission is made to any one of his brother, then prosecution for the blood which should be made according to usage, and payment should be made to him in good manner. This is alleviation from your Lord and mercy. So whoever exceeds the limit after this shall have a painful chastisement. Basically, if you kill one of my slaves, I can kill one of yours, blah, blah, blah. Barbaric cruelty, basically. 5 and 38. Cut off the hands of thieves wherever they are, male or female, as punishment for what they have done, a deterrent from God. God is almighty and wise. But if anyone repents after his wrongdoing and makes amends, God will accept his repentance, and God is most forgiving and merciful. Of course he is, after he's cut off your arms and legs. Let's go with the last one here because it's getting kind of sickening here. 8 and 12. Remember thy Lord inspired the angels with the message. I am with you. Give firmness to the believers. I will instill terror into the hearts of the unbelievers. Smite ye above their necks and smite all their fingertips off them. That is just one of the 75 teachings of beheadings in the Quran that I have found. There may be more. not that well versed on the Quran, though I did study it somewhat in college. So with those verses being put out there, I'm going to go ahead and let's kind of turn this thing into a discussion here. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I personally, and not those specific verses, but I mean, all of those were equally horrible. But I mean, I've been looking into the Quran a little bit and making some images here or there, trying to explain some stuff. And I I find it unbelievable every time I actually go to look up a new image to make about it, because of the hearing of the news stories that keep on talking about how Islam is peaceful, or how ISIS isn't really Islamic, and all this other stuff. Because as I read in the Quran, I can't help but to think, like, okay, every single line here is kill these people, kill those people, all because they don't believe in Allah. And I know at one point it talks about how Allah has hardened the hearts of people that don't believe, so don't even try, like, don't even mess with them. Don't even try. They're just going to be my little torture toy after they die. And so it it really baffles me that people can stick their head into the ground so far, like an ostrich, and hide that far away from their own religion. Because I mean, it's right there in the book, and if it doesn't show up on Sunday morning, or whenever they go to their place of worship, if it's not read to them, it just seems like most people don't even venture out past the gates, if you will.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. I'm going to let Brendan go ahead and chime in there.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I don't, he was saying about how it says that Allah has hardened people's hearts so that they can't believe in Him and all that, and it also says that in the Bible too about God. It says that He's hardened the unbeliever's heart, so it's made him impossible to believe, which is kind of ridiculous, because it's like, even if you wanted to, you couldn't. So how is that fair? But yeah, I mean, so there's parallels there between those, but basically it's just a matter of how much are you going to own your beliefs? Are you going to stick to them? How literal are you going to take it? I honestly don't know that much about how Muslims or Islam, or there's different sects obviously, and I don't know how they vary in their teachings, because with Christianity, they really focus on the New Testament. They kind of make excuses for the Old Testament and kind of have apologetics arguments to try to explain away those things. So I don't know how it's presented, but obviously there is a large percentage of Muslims that think that all those things are justified even today, which is just crazy. And the craziest thing to me is that these religions, whether it's Christianity or Islam, they believe that for non-believers, most people, pretty much like your ticket to heaven is believing in their God. And so any non-believers, when they die, are going to go to hell and suffer for eternity. And so the most amazing part about that is they already believe you're going to be punished by their God for eternity, and yet they're so impatient. They can't wait for you to die. They have to do it themselves. Like, if they can't convert you to their belief system, then they're going to kill you and then make their God punish you forever. So it's like, they just can't wait for you to die in 20 or 30 years. They're going to do it right now. So it's nuts. Like, why can't they just wait for their God to do it and be okay with that? Like, oh yeah, we know they're going to be punished forever. It's just whatever. But no, they want to force their beliefs on you. And yeah, I mean, just getting back to some of the stuff you were talking about, absolutely, it's, we have to condemn all this stuff, because whether or not people, stick to it and they literally adhere to it, which obviously in the Muslim world they do a lot more than Christians do with the Old Testament. But at any rate, that stuff in there is just abhorrent. It's terrible. It's clearly just primitive men just, forcing their crazy beliefs about women and sex and slaves and things like that. They clearly viewed people as property. They had no problem owning slaves and killing your slave if you killed one of theirs. They had they treated women like property. You know, marriage was all about owning a woman, and obviously another thing with religion too is propagating the religion, and you can do that by having many children. So, you know, when you're marrying a child at 6 years old and having sexual relations with them as soon as they reach the age of puberty, it's like you're immediately trying to produce as many children as possible. You know, so it's all about propagating the belief system. It's all about propagating the religion, and it's just insane to me that people in today's day and age can actually stick to this stuff. But, you know, I think it's a lot cultural, and it's a lot socio-political. You know, it depends where you live, because living in the United States, you know, we have a far more enlightened view of things than people tend to in third world countries, and that's where, you know, a lot of the Muslim countries are third world countries, so they have this backwards view of things still, and they haven't come to realize that things don't have to be that way. And, you know, I kind of cover that. I touched on that in a video that I did called "Own Your Beliefs or Discard Them." Because basically, if Christians owned their beliefs and actually, didn't make excuses for the Old Testament and all the stuff in there, then they'd be, looking like Westboro Baptist Church, or they'd be going to prison for, adhering to some of those things. And pretty much, a lot of Christians are able to use their modern sensibilities to kind of pass off on those things and be like, no, we don't believe that. But a lot of Muslims who live in a lot less enlightened areas of the world and less educated areas of the world, they still stick to that stuff. And, that's why we have to continue speaking out against it, because it's just awful.
I don't know if you've ever, probably not. I had an experience being able to be a part of a Muslim community once. And much like Christianity, there's a lot of cherry picking going on. In most Muslim communities, I was actually a member of 3 different ones. I had the opportunity to do that. They actually believe that the Bible, to include the Torah, is the prescription from Allah, and the Quran is the addition to it. So a lot of times I would ask these people, well, how do you feel about such and such verse, or how do you feel about this verse? And they would kind of do the whole backpedaling that Christians do. And the difference that I think is here, where you can draw the line, is that Christians have the Bible, and so the Bible has, all these stories in it. Yeah, there's some horrible stuff in there, but they have all these stories in it, and they really relate to these stories, whether it be, I guess the willingness of Job to suffer for God, and they have, Jonah in the whale for 3 days persevering, or Jonah in the fish for 3 days persevering, and they have stories like that, whereas the Quran is pretty much, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say about 70% horrifying stuff. So around 70%, prescribing to hurt, harm, and humiliate other members of humanity. And I think that the difference here is that a lot of Muslims will stick up for the Quran, whereas Christians will backpedal, make excuses, apologetics. A lot of Muslims will actually stick up for the Quran, and I experienced that being a part of Muslim communities. Would you like to chime in on that?
Yeah, that's interesting to hear, because I don't have that experience myself, but I definitely want to look more into that, and I'm trying to learn more about Islam and things like that so that I can better address, all of these things. Because obviously, being as familiar with Christianity as I am, it's easy to go after all of the bad stuff in the Bible, or make arguments against their apologetics, or excuses that they make, or even just specific claims. Like, I'm honestly just not that familiar with the Quran, so definitely something that I want to look into. For sure. But yeah, I think that's a good point too that you mentioned, is because it's like with Christians, they have the New Testament, so it's like they can point to Jesus and they say like, oh well, it's a new covenant, and you can kind of overlook all that stuff from the Old Testament, and we don't abide by that anymore. And you can debate on if that's actually what the Bible says or not, but either way, they at least have something that is encouraging and positive, and kind of cast doubt on all the old school atrocities in the Old Testament. And of course, Muslims don't believe that Jesus was, the Messiah. They just think he was just another prophet. So they don't really put as much emphasis on that. and they more, go from the Old Testament straight to the Quran. So they don't really, like I had made a meme with the 3 different books, the Torah, the Bible, and the Quran, and it's like a trilogy. The first one is, I called it God of War, and then the New Testament, I called it Kill Them with Kindness, and then for the Quran, I called it Off with Their Heads, and I think that's a really good representation of each one of those books. So if you cut out the middle one, the one that kind of has some good stories in it and some positive messages, then you're just left with 2 really terrible books that are full of violence and atrocities, and that's pretty much what Islam is. So,
yeah, the Quran is. I don't want to say that one religion is worse than another, but the Quran is definitely the most violent out of all 3. Let's go over here to YouTube real quick. We've got Contemplation. Says, like the Bible, speaking of the Quran, wasn't there an Islamic law passed that allowed a marriage to a 9-year-old? Most Islamic laws and countries recognize the passage that I presented from the Quran, which gives you, you can marry prepubescent girls. It's prepubescent. You can marry prepubescent girls. McKictionary says, I don't know about that, but Muhammad did marry a 9-year-old girl. He married a 6-year-old girl named Aisha, and he consummated the marriage at 9 years old. And Contemplation says again here, like in the Dark Ages. And that is what it would be really like if we were to allow these horrors to become mainstream. GE.
What?
Did you want to chime in on what we were speaking about there? We were speaking about comparing the Quran to the Bible or the Torah.
Well, I mean, I don't know, it's a little hard for me to compare them just because of how they read, because it's a little bit harder to read the Quran, in my opinion. That usually kind of gets in the way for me. But, like, I don't know, there seems to be a bit more fantasy in the Quran to me, but that might just be my own, perceptions, considering, where I'm at in the world. It might seem more fantastical because, like, for instance, at one point in the Quran, Muhammad gets on the back of basically a centaur with wings and flies off to Mecca in like a night, which would normally take like 3 weeks. And he just shows up in Mecca. It's like, oh yeah, I left like last night. And they're all like, oh, okay, that's right, because you're Muhammad. And you fuck children. But you have like fantastical things like that. Like another good one is apparently the stars or shooting stars in the sky are actually missiles sent by the devil, and then Allah fights them off with other things or something in it. But like apparently shooting stars are missiles from the devil. And it has like really fantastical stuff like that, which again, it might just be my own perception of it. But that's not to say that Christianity has its own special effects. Like, for instance, one of the stories about how Jesus' tomb was found empty was that these women walked up on it, and then like a bedazzled angel, spread the sky apart and floated down and sat on top of it and was like, "They're not here." And so it has its own special effects in the Bible too. It just seems like it occurs more often in the Quran to me.
Yeah, and
I wouldn't say that it occurs more often, but definitely there are some things in there that are a little bit crazy when you get to talking about winged horse rides or flaming chariots that can transport you across the world in one day. That is pretty fantastical, but so is being carried up into heaven by a whirlwind. So I think Brendan had something to say there.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in on that. Yeah, I agree. I mean, like I said, I'm not as familiar with the Quran personally, so I can't really speak to if it's more fantastical or not. I just think that, having been raised in a Christian culture, I think we're we're a little more accepting of some of the stuff that it claims, even though we know now that it's false. But it doesn't seem as crazy to us because we grew up with it. Maybe if we grew up with stories about the Barak, which is this winged horse or whatever you want to call it that Muhammad flies around on and ascends into heaven on, like maybe if we grew up with that, it wouldn't seem as crazy to us. But I don't know. But I just want to share a quick anecdote about that too, because when I was still a Christian, I was reading this book, and it was basically, it was like a Christian book, and it was, kind of explaining why Islam is so weird and crazy. And I remember reading this story about the Barak, and like I just thought it was the craziest thing ever. And meanwhile, I believe that Jesus existed and was the creator of the universe that came to Earth and ascended into heaven and all this. So it's just funny to me that I look back now and I'm like, oh yeah, that was crazy. And meanwhile, I still believed all this other crazy stuff. And like John was saying, yeah, there's stuff in the Quran about whatever rocks flying out from outer space, and they're from the devil and all this, and and yet is that at Mecca where they have the giant stone? It's basically like a giant asteroid, and they all like worship it. I don't know if that, maybe you guys can correct me on that, but
yes,
they definitely have a giant,
basically.
Yeah, they have a giant shrine that's a freaking asteroid, and they act like this is a sign from God, like. And we know far better now where something like that would come from, and it has nothing to, and yet people still worship it like it was a sign from God. So yeah, it's just a little nuts.
All right, so to kind of wrap this thing up, I'll go ahead and say, do I think that Islamophobia is a real thing? Of course I do. Islamophobia kind of led to the opening, or well, not necessarily the opening, but the greater instituting of Guantanamo Bay. If you know the statistics on that, and you know how many people were actually held there just because they came from a Muslim country, or just because they were Islamic activists, to say, were being held there, then you already understand that Islamophobia is a real thing. Is it as widespread as people think? I say no. I think that just because you criticize something does not mean you're Islamophobic. By us criticizing this winged horse or Barak, I know I murdered that pronunciation there, but for us to criticize that does not make us Islamophobes. Now, people will say, yes, Brendan, prototype atheist, oh, you're making fun of that? Oh, we hold that belief up high. You're an Islamophobe because of that. Or, Aeolus, you're reading out of the Quran there and saying these horrible things about the Quran, you're an Islamophobe. No, we're not an Islamophobe. Just like if we criticize Christianity, there are so many things in Christianity that we criticize. That does not make us, I guess, Christianophobes. You want to chime in on that?
Christphobia?
Christphobia. That's good. There you go.
Yeah.
Christphobia.
I think that I know that Islamophobia is a real thing, and that I think that people need to understand what words mean before they start trying to use them. If I ever pull a word out of my ass, I usually check it with Google, make sure I understand how to use it first. Because you don't want to be talking and want to sound intellectually superior because photosynthesis kind of situation. But I think that it is a real thing, and that it does happen, especially with where I'm at. I'm in the North Alabama, Bible Belt America, and the one mention of Islam or Muslims or anything, and all of a sudden it's terrorist this, terrorist that, and it's like, really? That's the kind of thing that I'm surrounded by just about every day at work. But that would be Islamophobia. But simply criticizing a religion and not hiding from the seedier parts of it is not Islamophobia in the least bit. So.
Once again, shout out to our viewers over on YouTube. We've got Cristobal Munaz. He says, how about the talking donkeys, in parentheses, in the Bible? I believe you're referring to probably, I think it's Numbers 22, where the man struck his donkey 3 times, and then God made the donkey speak. Why have you struck me these 3 times? Yes, that is very fantastical. We know, as well as everyone else, that donkeys do not talk, and that is fantasy. Go ahead, Brandon.
Yeah, I agree. And you know, the reason that I could never believe that that donkey ever talked is because I wouldn't believe it that a donkey had the opportunity to speak and didn't brag about Ezekiel 23:20. So if you're unfamiliar with that, go ahead and look it up. That's my view on that.
That's one of my
Yeah,
favorite verses. If I can get that on a T-shirt, I will get it, and I will find it, and I will wear it.
I don't care if it's metaphorical or not. It's still like, what is that doing in the Bible? Like, God could not translate his message to humans without using explicit sexual imagery. Apparently, that was, I guess, that's the best we can do 2,000 years ago to understand the mind of God. But yeah, as far as Islamophobia, again, you know, just to reiterate my thoughts on this and kind of wrap it up, it's definitely a real thing, but it's definitely overstated much of the time. Criticizing any idea, whether it's religious or not, especially any unsubstantiated claim, especially claims that can be proven to be demonstrably false, is not, you know, it's not racist, it's not wrong, it's not bigoted. It's just the way that rational people operate. So definitely, you know, Islam is certainly up for criticism. It's certainly something that we need to continue to do. I think even more so than some other religions, just because of, you know, like, this is what Sam Harris and Bill Maher talk about. It's, you know, there's so much of the Muslim world that is approving still of all these barbaric acts that are described in the Quran, and they don't make as many excuses for it to try to sit, you know, distance themselves from it, and it's still enforced in many countries. So we definitely need to continue to speak out against it and, you know, make headway there and educate people about this. But at the same time, Islamophobia is a real thing. You know, it's something that I forgot to mention earlier. Another example of this is, like, there was several states, I think, like Oklahoma was one of them. There might have been like a South Carolina in there and maybe a couple others. But they were trying to preemptively ban Sharia law from ever being implemented, which is just hilarious because, for one, there's nobody advocating for that presently, and for two, you know, most of the things in Sharia law are already not allowable under the Constitution. And so, you know, that's basically just like promoting fear and paranoia and trying to pander to the Christian voting base to say, like, oh, look, we're fighting Islam and all this, and but it's just unnecessary. And the most ironic part about that, of course, is that a lot of those people who are trying to do things like that are the same people who are putting up the 10 Commandments in front of courthouses, or who are trying to say that our country was founded on biblical values and things of that nature. So, you know, they're like, oh, we can't have religion running things here, and then they're like, well, unless it's ours. So that's my thoughts on that.
GE?
Well, I don't know. I had already said my thing about the Islamophobia. I think that you know, it is a real thing. So.
Yeah, I mean, we pretty much nailed all of it. So there was a couple statistics that I wanted to go over real quick, and before we venture into that, I just want to say once again that if your religion asks you to view other people as less than you or less than another group of people, there is a problem. We cannot value supernatural claims because none have been proven thus far. We can value human life because subconsciously or consciously, every human values their own life, and we should place that value on every other human on the planet. So I know that there are a lot of religious moderates in Islam. There are a lot of religious moderates of Christianity here in America, and that is what keeps it going. So for the people who are religious moderates, I just want you to know that when you are a religious moderate, you empower those fundamentalists. And how you do that is because you are a follower of that religion. So if this fundamentalist says, yes, we got to kill these unbelievers, we got to, send terrorist attacks to the United States, what can you say against that? Because you're a religious moderate, you have to go, well, yeah, well, the Quran does say that, or, well, the Bible does say that. So you really have no argument. So you are actually propping up these fundamentalists. And I think at the very core, that is what Bill Maher and Sam Harris were trying to show Ben Affleck, but he obviously wasn't getting it. So to go ahead with these statistics here, I have one. This is regarding children. 4 out of 5 Middle Eastern women are sexually abused between the ages of 3 and 6 by family members. Let me go ahead and throw out a couple here more, and then we'll discuss those. More than half of all Yemeni girls are married before reaching puberty. About 1 in 10 pregnancies in the Arab world ends in abortion. In Pakistan, every 6th pregnancy is terminated. And 94% of Yemeni children between 2 and 14 years old are subjected to violence from a parent or guardian. What do you guys have to say, or what do you think about these statistics regarding children, with the idea or the thought that I have already outlined what the Quran says about this?
Well, I mean, those are some pretty horrible statistics. I think that a lot of people will say, that it's the people that do it, not the religion. And I would disagree about it because of the power that religion and religious belief can have over your decision-making skills. Whereas somebody that wouldn't normally do something, but because they've been just kind of brainwashed by the religion and they've been convinced of this alternative way and have been shown how it's better somehow or whatnot, they end up doing, these crazy, outrageous things or being violent with their family and whatnot. So I think that the religion, you have to put some kind of blame on just religious beliefs and how powerful they can be, and how powerful, and just the general power that they have over a person's decision-making skills.
I think what you're reaching for there is the quote, good people do good things and bad people do bad things. But for a good person to do a bad thing, that requires religion. I think that's what you're looking for there. Brendan, go ahead.
Yeah, all those things that you quoted there, all those statistics are just completely awful, obviously. And, the thing they have in common is obviously Islam permeates the culture in those countries that practice those things. And so I think it's very much cultural, but you definitely cannot step away and, separate the culture from the religion, because Islam is the culture, and Islam definitely condones a lot of those things. And even if there were more moderate people or more sensible people who, normally would speak out against these things, they might feel compelled to, because of the culture they live in, support these things, or at least keep silent on them, whether they might risk, their own safety, or because they just don't have the courage to speak out against it or disagree. And so you definitely can't separate, Islam from these practices of, abuse of women and children, and the female genital mutilation and all of these things. And, like you were speaking about religious moderates, and, Reza Aslan, who wrote the book Zealot, recently about Jesus, and he's a Muslim. He's pretty mainstream. A lot of people are familiar with him, and he kind of scored a lot of brownie points with people when he went on Fox News, and the interviewer was kind of challenging him, like, well, what qualifications do you have to speak on Jesus because you're a Muslim? And he's like, well, I study religion. That's what I do for a living. He's kind of inflating his qualifications. Actually, he was kind of overstating. But regardless, like, you don't have to be a Christian to criticize Christianity. You don't have to be a Muslim to know about Islam and the claims and things like that. But then, more recently, he's tried, like, distancing Islam from, like, female genital mutilation, saying, like, oh, well, that's an African thing. It's a cultural thing. It doesn't have anything to do with Islam. And that's really not accurate. I mean, to an extent it is, but it's very much tied to Islam. So you definitely can't, completely set the two things aside. They're definitely not mutually exclusive. There's a lot of overlap there. And then also specifically to him, he also recently commented about how, like Bill Maher and Sam Harris, he's claiming that they're not qualified to speak on religion because they don't hold degrees in religion specifically, which is just ridiculous because, again, you don't need to hold, you don't have to be an expert in religion to be able to criticize it. And especially considering the fact that somebody like Harris is a neurosurgeon, he obviously has a grasp of science. And so that alone in itself is enough to be able to criticize, some of the false claims, whether it be, Islam or Christianity or what have you. So basically, he's an example of somebody who's a moderate who, like you say, is propping up the extremists by trying to make excuses for his religion and trying to distance it from things that it really is involved with. So.
Well, here's the thing that I think. I think that if you're going to be a religious moderate and you're going to say things like, we'll take Christianity for example here. Well, Jesus said to love your neighbor as you love yourself and things like that. If you're going to hold those things up, then you need to at least accept that the Bible says some horrific things. So the same thing for Islam. If you're going to prop up good Islamic things, and they always boast about the scientific understandings that are in the Quran, which are very ambiguous, I'll say, just to say the least. If you're going to prop those things up, then you need to say, hey, some of this Islamic stuff, I don't believe it. The stuff that's in the Quran, kill the unbelievers. No, I don't believe it. I think that you need to separate it, and that's the only way. That's the only way for us to advance as a species. We have to continue to dispel these myths, and we have to show these believers, whether it be Islam, Christianity, Hinduism, which is a totally other topic, but we have to keep showing them, hey, these things that are going on in this religion are horrible. For example, that's why I have the Biblical Story series on my page. I want people to see there are some really horrible things in there. Yes, they're good. Yes, religions do good, but they do bad. And 9 times out of 10, the bad outweighs the good. I'm going to go ahead and hear some other statistics so we can discuss these as well. So this is a very interesting poll that I found. And I watched a lot of videos on YouTube of social experiments. I don't know if you guys check those out, but there's a couple social experiments that went viral on YouTube where guys go out and they dress these women up as Muslims and they go out in public and they criticize them. And what you find is that people will stand up for these Muslims and go to the point of almost attacking the offender. And it kind of goes into the statistic that I'm about to tell you, a Pew study. In 2011, this Pew study found that Muslims are more phobic of non-Muslims than the non-Muslims are Islamophobic of Muslims. Do you guys think that this kind of ties into what we're talking about? Do you think that they're misplacing this phobia here on us?
Well, I don't know if it's that they're misplacing the phobia on us. I'd really have to see some more, I guess, statistics on that particular relationship because, part of me wants to say, yeah, sure, but another part of me is like, well, that could be a fluke or something like that. Because I mean, there's been even in climate change, there's still papers that are submitted that are anti-climate change. Uh, they've been severely reduced, but I mean, you know, the I would think that you need to do more study on it to really have a definite answer. But if that were the case, then sure, I would agree that it's kind of shifting the phobia line a little bit because in America there are some people that are just generally Islamophobic, but at the same time our society is really starting to shun those people, and that's a good thing. Like the people in the public light that say these kinds of things, they're usually shunned by other people in the public light and by society in general. So uh, we're seeing that nice shift there to really openly criticize those that kind of infringe on that whole idea.
Yeah, and as far as I go, that's interesting. That sounds a bit like projection to me. And if anybody's unfamiliar with that, that's pretty much when you like project your failings or your feelings onto somebody else. So pretty much they're accusing us of doing what they actually do. So that's interesting, and that kind of turns the whole conversation on its ear. Like, are they accusing us of doing what they actually do to us? By claiming that we're racist and we fear them and all that.
Projection. I think somebody said that just a few seconds ago.
Yeah, yeah, and I think what it boils down to, and this isn't unique to Islam or Muslims, but basically the inability to separate themselves from what they believe in. When you criticize their beliefs or their religion, they take it as a personal attack, and so they have the inability to separate the two, and that's, I think, a large part of it. And I think they're less able to do that than some other religious people. But even, so you speak to how, Muslims are more phobic of non-Muslims, but, the thing is there's many different sects of Islam, and they frequently fight amongst themselves. Usually with something like Christianity, there's a lot of different sects, but usually their disagreements, they can just talk them out, or they're just agree to disagree or whatever. But when it comes to Islam, and again, this might be, political too, but they're constantly fighting amongst themselves, constantly attacking each other. That's why you have all this mess in the Middle East right now. You got ISIS, and you got Syria, and you got Saudi Arabia and Iran, and all these different countries, and they're all conflicting. You got Iraq, which is made up of like Sunnis and Shiites, and then you got the Kurds, and it's like you have all these different belief systems that are all Islamic, and they're all conflicting with one another, and they're all fighting one another, let alone any other, infidels, non-believers of Islam at all. So you have all that whole angle to it as well. And earlier you had mentioned something about the Jonah and the whale story, and it's like, I don't think there's any Jew or any Christian anywhere that would advocate for harming or killing somebody who didn't believe in that story. And yet Iran recently, like within the last week or two, actually executed a man, not for being not a Muslim, not for being a Christian, but literally just for casting doubt on a story that claims that a fish swallowed a man and he lived in there for 3 days. So I think that really exemplifies the difference between the extremism that we see between Islam and other religions.
Well, here's another thing as well. So Islam, a primary difference here between Islam and Christianity is that Islam does not have as many sects. I've seen some estimates of sects of Christianity, up to 30,000 different sects of Christianity. Islam does not have that many. Islam probably has, I saw a poll here that said that they have, or actually not a poll, but some research information here that said they have, compared to Christianity, less than 1% of sects of Christianity. That is still a pretty high number, but the problem here is that these fundamentalists are usually the ones that gain power in these Islamic countries. So to continue this here, I wanted to throw another couple statistics at you guys, and then we can wrap it up. So let's see here. Turkey has more journalists in prison than any other country in the world, almost double that of China and Iran. 40% of Indonesian Muslims, so this is in Indonesia, says they would use violence against those blaspheming Islam. 40%, not a minority, so that's a pretty big chunk. So we already discussed the 78% of British Muslims supporting punishment for the guy who was drawing cartoons of Muhammad. And since 1990, 52 people accused of blasphemy in Pakistan have been extrajudicially killed by lynch mobs. Now, if you guys are wondering where I'm getting this information, I'm over here on Islam Wiki, clicking on these reference links and checking them out and checking out these different Pew polls. So over here on YouTube, real quick, we've got contemplation. I love how unicorns are mentioned in the Bible. Yes, that's not really relevant to the discussion, but yes, they are mentioned in the Bible. You'll see many apologetics try to say that those are not unicorns, just as you'll see those same people saying that the behemoth, you know what I'm referring to, they're trying to say that that's a dinosaur. Cristobal Munaz, if only believers could evolve, but they don't believe in it. That's pretty good. Contemplation, LOL, yeah, I wonder how they're going to take the 200,000-year-old Neanderthal fossils. If you guys want to comment on those statistics, I have just a few more I'm going to throw at you before we get out of here.
Well, I mean, it doesn't surprise me that the Indonesian Muslims, they wanted, what, death for anybody that blasphemes Muhammad?
Well, the funny thing is, let me chime in. Sorry, let me chime in one more time here. So, I don't know if you guys remember that Indonesia was ravaged by that, I guess, hurricane, I guess you would call it, whatever, tsunami, typhoon, whatever. And they are almost 90% Christian. So let me scroll back up to this statistic here about them. 40%. So keep in mind, this country was 90% Christian, but 40% of the Muslims said that they would use violence against those blaspheming Islam. Go ahead there, GE. You muted yourself, GE. You muted yourself. You were unmuted, but then.
Well, I mean, even still, I mean, it just shows, you know, how far do you want to take your religion? Because I mean, you even play that with Christianity, because you know here or with Christianity, you have either Westboro Baptist Church or like there's this one congregation that's near me that's barely even Christianity, in my opinion. And so you have just these two ends of the spectrum. So it's really just about how seriously you want to take it. And the sad thing is, and the sad fact is that a good portion of the Muslim world still holds to a lot of the ideals in the Quran. And when asked about it, you know, I guess the variation is just going to be on how much they want to exact Allah's wrath.
Brendan? Look like you're talking there, but your mic was muted.
Yeah, no, I'll jump in there. So, yeah, you said, what, 40% of Muslims in Indonesia were in favor of punishing those who blaspheme Muhammad. Yeah, that's, you know, I think that's just unfortunately fairly typical, and it just goes to show that even in a country where Islam is not the predominant religion, where it's only practiced in pockets, that, you know, the people that do practice it, who are even exposed to probably what's more of a Christian culture, probably a little more enlightened, I would imagine, than something that you would find in the Middle East that's predominantly a Muslim country, and yet they still hold these beliefs. So it just goes to show how deeply ingrained these biases are, and, you know, against people who don't share their beliefs. And how firmly rooted that type of attitude of non-believers aren't welcome and we either have to convert or punish them is just ingrained in Muslims all over the world, wherever they are.
Now, a lot of people will oftentimes accuse us of, why are you only picking on Christians? I get that one a lot because like 70% of my subscribers are actually Christians. So I get that one a lot. Why are you only picking on Christians? Well, we're not always just picking on Christians. We think that religions worldwide should be criticized and should be put under the microscope as far as what they do. So to kind of transition into that, we'll go with this statistic right here. 9 of the top 10 persecutors of Christians are Islamic countries. Of the top 50, only 12 have a source other than Islam. So that means that 38 of the countries that persecute Christians use Islam as their source. So right here you can see that we're not only picking on Christians, we're talking about Islam here. Islam is one of the top perpetrators of Christians. They don't give them a chance. They behead them, murder them, torture them, kill them. We're not only picking on Christianity. Now, get this straight too, we're not only picking on Islam. We think all religions should be dispelled and just treat people as you would treat others. The golden rule, which was penned long before any of these religions came into existence. Real quick, let's go here. There are 13 countries in the world where the state can execute you for being an atheist. 13 countries. Every single one is Islamic. What do you guys have to say about that? Because that directly relates to us. If we were on this broadcast in one of these 13 countries, they could come get us and execute us as we speak.
Well, what I think is funny is that most of the time, when other countries come up in a conversation with a Christian, they're referencing me. If I don't like the Christian faith, that I just need to get out of America and go to one of the more Islamic countries. And I guess I just see things a different way, because whenever they tell me that, whenever I hear that, I can't help but to think that they're saying, like, hey, look, at least we're not trying to kill you yet. And so why don't you go to a country where they actually are trying to kill you as a way of looking into the future as to what I want to do to you tomorrow?
Believe it or not, I actually get that a lot from Christians. They say, hey, we're being a lot more tolerant of you than those Muslims would be. And I don't think that's relevant at all, but I'm going to go ahead and let Brendan chime in with what he thought about those statistics.
Yeah, and really, it's not surprising. I mean, and I'm glad you brought that up too, as far as the countries that will kill atheists, because it's true. Muslims are equal opportunity, offenders. They'll anybody that's not a Muslim, or even if they're not a specific sect of Islam, they'll go after. And this has been the case over and over again. There was that woman Maryam Ibrahim in Sudan who was a Christian woman, and they were trying to sentence her to death, but only because of public global outcry they ended up releasing her. There was a guy in Nigeria by the name of Mubarak who Godless Mom actually spearheaded a campaign to get the word out about him, because his family put him in a mental hospital for being an atheist in a very much Muslim country, and so his life and his well-being were in jeopardy there. So yeah, there's no doubt about it that Islam and the culture of Islam and its intolerance of non-Muslims is very much far and away way worse than anything else that any other religion out there, not even comparable. So let's just get that out there first of all. It's definitely the worst. But that being said, at the same time, like you guys were talking about, I often get this defense of, hey, at least we're not Muslims, from Christians saying like, oh, why don't you go worry about them over there? They're doing all this stuff, they're killing people. All we're doing is trying to legislate the Bible into law in the United States. Why are you worried about that? We're not killing anybody. And basically, the behavior of the adherents of a specific religion has no correlation to the veracity of the claims of the religion, is the way that I like to put it. So, it doesn't matter that Muslims are far more likely to be violent than somebody of another religion. The simple fact is that their beliefs are equally false and equally up for criticism. So while I absolutely condemn the actions of extremist Muslims far and away more than, Christians or anybody else, for the most part, in general, for sure, that doesn't mean that Christianity is any more true. And so, I definitely just had to comment on that. And basically, we don't pick on Christians. It's just a matter of the fact that we tend to know more about that religion because we were raised with it for the most part. And we live in a country where that affects us daily. And so that's why we tend to speak out more against Christianity. But obviously, we try to make an effort in things like today with this discussion to, not only focus on that, but definitely make it known that Islam is far worse and it's definitely worthy of criticism.
Yeah, so just real quickly over here on YouTube, we've got Kevin Howard. I think one of the main reasons that the followers of Islam are more extreme is that the secular societies have been able to take hold more within the areas of the world that are Christian. Well, real quickly, I'll just go ahead and say this. Most Christian societies, and we'll say that, and by that I mean the U.S., because we're about 73% Christian. Now, a lot of people will have a misconception there that America is a Christian nation. It is not, but it primarily consists of Christians. So to address what you have said here, I find that Christians are more likely to kind of evolve their beliefs. If you sit down with a Christian and you whip out your Bible and you show them specific verses, I've done this, and they'll say, well, I don't really believe that. I mean, come on, you don't really believe that, right? Well, if you sit down with the Quran and show that, which I said that I told you guys I've done this because I was in 3 Muslim communities. One of them was when I was in the military, which you would expect to be probably the most peaceful Muslim community, but you would be wrong, because they were more likely, in my subjective experience, 1 out of 3, more likely to uphold those commandments from the Quran that prescribe you to kill and torture, beat, mutilate, humiliate the non-believer. Now, I see GE had something to say there, so real quick, I'm going to go back over here to YouTube. And I think that Christianity used to kill atheists as well. That was contemplation. Yes, they used to do all kinds of ridiculous horrors to atheists or anyone who would not profess Christianity. Kevin Howard, when I came out as an atheist in South Carolina, I received death threats, so it isn't just other countries. I'll agree with you there. Coming out as an atheist is social suicide, but that will not change until we all band together and make it change and make people realize that atheist does not have as many negative connotations as they presume. GE, you had something to say.
I don't know about all that, on what you just said about getting the death threats and how it's not just in other countries, that's very evident, especially with there was this girl in I think it was South Carolina. She wanted to have a secular after school thing, a group, and she even started a GoFundMe that I tried to help out and get some traffic on. And she was able to raise enough money to have her group, but then she ended up having to step away from the group just because she was getting so many death threats and so many violent messages and whatnot. And so she had to step away from it because it was getting too dangerous. So It's a very real thing over here too. Locally in the states and not just abroad. I would definitely agree with that.
Sorry for kind of dominating here. Can you guys hear me? Can you see me? You guys see me? Okay, good. Thumbs up there. So I just wanted to clarify. We are very thankful as atheists. We're very thankful to Islam because I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the Islamic Golden Age, but at one point, Islam was solely responsible for all mathematical and science discoveries and understandings. I have a really a great post on this on Facebook. You can check the page Philosophical Atheism for the post. But there was a great quote that said that if in the year 1000, if Nobel Prizes were around, they would have 99.9% went to Muslim people. And the reason for that is our foundations of science and mathematics came primarily from the Muslim greats. Now, to kind of transition from then, which was, 1,000 years ago until now, OIC countries have 8.5 scientists, engineers, technicians per 1,000. 8.5 per 1,000, whilst the world average is 40.7. A survey of religious and irreligious American physicians finds Muslim physicians are least likely to accept evolution. Now, keep in mind, guys, evolution, while the theory of evolution has the word theory in it, it has been pretty much been established as a fact. Only 8% of Egyptians, 11% of Malaysians, and 22% of Turks agree that Darwin's theory is probably or most certainly true. That's less than 25% in Turkey, Malaysia, and Egypt. 46 Muslim 46 Muslim countries contribute to 1.17% to world science literature, compared to 1.66% by India and 1.48% by Spain. So what I really wanted to address here was the fact that the golden age of Islam, which was their foundations of algebra and, science, pretty much everything that we understand today can find its foundation in Islamic discoveries and science. And the problem is, I think, so I'm just going to say here what I think, is that these texts have been used, Islamic texts have been used to kind of control people more so. And so they're unable to, go out and become a scientist or become a proponent of someone that is anti-Islamic or anti-Muslim and really study and understand the world as it is. And I think there was something that said that there was less than 10 Nobel Prizes went out to Muslims since then, basically. Did you guys want to chime in on that? Because this kind of has to relate. This kind of relates with science and Islam here.
Well, it's no doubt that Islam was a central force in the past. With the fact that we've got a whole bunch of math and stuff out of it. I don't know. I've had a lot of Muslims try to use that against me in arguments. Because I'm of the position that Islam is no longer useful, and they'll try to point out things in the past that Islam has done correctly or something, like advancements in math, and just because it was at a good force or they did some good things at one time doesn't mean that it gets a free pass on just everything. That's kind of what it sounds like, like the Catholics do with their faith and sexual abuse in the organization, because they'll be like, well, Catholicism's done this and this and that and that. Okay, but what about the thousand of years where serially molested and abused young children? I just don't think that doing some stuff right in the past gives you a free pass for the rest of eternity.
Yeah, and as far as my opinion on that, it isn't surprising at all that a lot of Muslims today don't believe in evolution and cast doubt on it. Especially, you have the groups like ISIS and the Taliban and similar extremist groups actually banning the teaching of it, which, isn't surprising again because, obviously knowledge, especially of the sciences, are what you really need to understand and realize that these ancient religions are just completely incompatible with what we know, with reality. So it's no doubt, it's not surprising that they would want to suppress that. I do agree, of course, that, the Islamic culture back in that time definitely added a lot to our knowledge of science and mathematics, and definitely laid a foundation for a lot of things. Whether that was because of or in spite of Islam, or unrelated, I'm not sure. Maybe it was just a cultural thing. Maybe just a matter of conquests and where they were, what lands they were taking over and who was being brought into the fold and that kind of things. I'm not familiar enough with it, but yeah, I definitely do recognize their achievements during that time period. But again, and this is actually related to, I think, the video that I'm putting out this week, which is that, basically theists were like the first scientists. So if you want more of my opinion on that, be sure to check out my video coming out this week. Subscribe to my channel. But last before I cut out here, and I'll shoot it over to Aeolus to kind of wrap things up. But I'm sure everybody's aware by now that Malala won the Nobel Prize this past week for her courageous efforts and what she's done. And so we definitely need to commend her for that. She is, as far as I know, still a Muslim, and that's okay. Hopefully she'll come to realize how oppressive it is. I mean, I don't know how it could be any more obvious than what the Taliban did to her by shooting her in the head. But hopefully that will come with time. She's still very young, but obviously very deserving, very courageous, and really, in spite of Islam, she won that award. So we just need to recognize that in her and realize that, she's a one great example of why we shouldn't judge all Muslims. And that's pretty much all I have to say.
I definitely agree with that. Can you guys go ahead and advertise here? So we're at the end of the video because we kind of pushed this over a little bit since we didn't have our other members. But go ahead and advertise here. And when these guys advertise their channels, their products, their Facebooks, I'm telling you that I stand behind these guys 100%. That's why they are here. So go ahead, guys, and do that.
I am John Gleason, the Godless Engineer. You can find me on YouTube under the user Godless Engineer. I'm also on Facebook, same name. Search in the little search bar on Facebook for Godless Engineering, and you'll get our group. And I would suggest joining up and seeing how that works for you. And of course, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram. Just put me into a search engine. You should be able to find me, Godless Engineer.
And my name is Brendan. I go by Prototype Atheist. Like I said, if you want to follow me on YouTube, I put out a video about every once a week. Find me on Facebook and Twitter as well. And, if you like these conversations that we have, we're trying to do this as a weekly thing, so please spread the word, other people that might be interested in these conversations. And, we just appreciate you watching and listening to our conversation, and we appreciate the comments and everybody, joining in, because we want it to be a conversation and not just us speaking to you. So, just basically thanks for watching, and, go ahead and find me as well as these other two guys on social media.
So real quickly, let me head over here to YouTube. We've got Contemplation. He says, I can't even think of a time that Islam has benefited the world from a scientific position, at least while I have been alive. You're correct. I think in the past century there has been around 10 Islamic individuals who were attributed the Nobel Prize. Now, keep in mind that statistic that I gave you from the year 1000, if the Nobel Prize was around, almost 100% of Nobel Prizes would have been given to Muslims. And the reason for that is they are the foundation. They are the mathematical geniuses behind algebra and the scientific geniuses behind how we understand the cosmos. Yes, that is true. We'll give that to Islam. They gave that to humanity. But throughout the years, somehow, the religion has been able to, I guess, kind of, overshadow the scientific understanding of the world and science in general, and that is why approximately less than 10% have been given the Nobel Prize. So real quickly, you guys know I had to keep a little bit of humor in here for the end. You're going to laugh at this, GE and Prototype Atheist, but I have some I have some statistics here on pornography from Islamic countries. I'm sorry I had to do this, but I found these articles and I really had to do it. Alright, so here we go. Google survey finds that mostly Muslim states seek access to sex-related websites. They rank 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, 8 in the top 10. 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, and 8. That is out of the top 5 countries that seek access to sex-related sites are Muslim countries. Number 2, Iranians made the highest number of visits to immoral sites on Ashura Day. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but you should definitely Google it and check it out. It is quite ironic. Approximately 2 million online users watch pornographic films each minute in Turkey. If you've been following this live stream at all, you already know our prior comments on Turkey and what their country pretty much stands for. So we'll go to the next one. Pakistan ranked number 1 in searches for child sex, animal sex, rape sex, camel sex, dog sex, and rape video. These are freaking hilarious, and I'm sorry that we had to pick on Islam there for a minute, but you guys know we're always accused by Christians for picking on Christians, so I had to save that last bit of the show to bring some pornographic statistics to Islam and Muslim countries. You guys know I'm Aeolus, aka your favorite atheist. These guys here in this live stream, the Godless Engineer, and Brendan, aka the Prototype Atheist, are great. We all create great videos. We are kind of sort of, startup channels here in the atheist community, but we produce great content. Check all of our channels out. I support them 100%. You'll see their links on my channels. Don't forget to check them out. As I said, I'm Aeolus, aka your favorite atheist. You can find me on religionhurtshumanity.com. I blog there. Check it out. You can find me on the Facebook pages, facebook.com/philosophicalatheism and facebook.com/religionhurtshumanity. If you find this video anywhere other than my channel, you can find me at youtube.com/godworksout or at godworksout. Would you guys like to say any last words before we go? By the way, we're really sorry that we drug this live stream out. We kind of did it because we didn't have the other members here, so we had free reign to talk about whatever we wanted to talk about.
I don't really have anything. I normally sign off with think skeptically and stay godless, so that.
Yeah, no, that's pretty much all the thoughts I had. Just kudos to you for not bringing up the statistics regarding pornography in the Bible Belt. So.
It would have been pretty bad. I mean, we're always accused of picking on Christians and isolating Christians. So I had to dedicate those last few minutes to putting up pornographic statistics of Islam, and it's bad. And if you really want to know, just Google it. I mean, you can find that the Christian statistics are just as bad as the Islam statistics. So check it out. Thanks for watching our podcast. Let's look over here on YouTube, see if anybody else had a question. No, they did not. Cristobal Munoz said, that's for educational purposes. We are glad that we are here to educate you on things that you did not know about. We are happy to promote reason, our acronym. And as always, guys, I'm Aeolus. Thanks for watching.